I've already introduced myself and you already know me, so we don't need to do that part there. There we go. So my services, they do look as if there's quite a lot there, but, you know, in all honesty, they do interlink with each other. So, you know, for example, the stress risk assessment that I would do would, you know, underpin other interventions that I might carry out, certainly in the workplace. And I always use the analogy of looking for the fire rather than following the smoke in that way, because sometimes it can be quite superficial, especially when we talk about stress in the working environment. We look at the smoke, we deal with the smoke. It doesn't mean to say that we're actually getting to the fire and the crux of the issue that's happening there. So this morning specifically, I'm going to talk a little bit about supporting people. And even more specifically, I'm going to go through something that's quite close to me and something I'm very passionate about, one of the services that I do, which is carrying out assessments and supporting people in the workplace with specific learning difficulties. And as you can imagine, you know, people suffer stress and anxiety for a variety of reasons. One of them could be undiagnosed learning difficulties that they may have had throughout their life, but it's just been overlooked, or they've carried out masking techniques so that they don't display these in the workplace, or they might not want to display them in the workplace. So why is it important to keep an eye on this? Well, the first one is the big stick that pops up there is the Equality Act of 2010. And the learning difficulties are actually recognised under the Equality Act, and also neurodiverse conditions such as ADHD and autism. So therefore, the employers do have that responsibility to support individuals and also to make reasonable adjustments. So that could be from their selection process, you know, so when people are being recruited, it can be throughout their working life, and also if they're promoting or anything like that, making reasonable adjustments so that they can have the same benefits and, you know, the equal opportunities that other people that are neurotypical in the workplace. So getting into a bit more detail then, so the three areas that I usually assess in is dyslexia, dyspraxia and dyscalculia. So there's your definition of dyslexia is on there if you want to read that quickly, but I'll keep talking while you're doing that. So it is lifelong. It affects literacy and language. It can affect people in completely different ways. You know, sometimes they can have visual disturbance. Sometimes it could be issues like concentration, focus, and an array of things really, which could lead to the dyslexia diagnosis there. The next one is DCD, developmental coordination disorder, or otherwise known as dyspraxia. So this is a learning difficulty that affects fine motor coordination and also planning. Now this is developmental, so it's usually present, it's always present in childhood and continues into adulthood. And sometimes I do come across people where they say that they experience issues that could be associated with dyspraxia, but they haven't had them since childhood. And then we look for other things, which could be maybe a severe accident that they've had. It could be head injury or anything that could have changed the course of that. And I actually had one of those quite recently, someone that had had the accident, and he'd been told that he was dyspraxic. And when we peel back the layer of the onion there, we said, well, it's highly unlikely that you are. It could actually be related to the accident that you've had there. And that was the point where the symptoms became more severe. So the next one is dyscalculia. Now, this is quite rare. In fact, it's very rare. The research into dyscalculia is about 30 years behind dyslexia. And funnily enough, it will always be 30 years behind dyslexia. It's the difficulties with numbers specifically. Okay. Now, it can be quite difficult to actually spot this one, but it is quite severe, you know, in the way that people struggle with the numbers. And just because someone finds maths difficult does not necessarily mean that they suffer from dyscalculia. If their maths abilities are in line with their other abilities, so if we did a cognitive test and they were weak on all aspects, then we could discount this as being a learning difficulty in this one. But if there is quite a wide range from that, so basically if they have a high level of cognitive ability and then a low level of maths ability specifically, and they cannot retain formulas, processes, etc., and things like that, struggle to tell the time, read dates, mixing up numbers, then we could focus down and look at potential dyscalculia for a diagnosis there. So the assessment process then, nice little picture there of the WAIS-4. So that's the Weisler Adult Intelligence Scale. That's something that I use for the cognitive processing there, and I can do all of that online now. I've got various platforms that I use to do that. It's all restricted purchase on that, so you need to have the right qualifications to be able to purchase these documents and assessments. So the assessment process starts before I would meet the client face to face. So there's a pre-assessment questionnaire which goes into just about all details that you can possibly imagine. So we look at the current situation, what their job is, what they do in the workplace, what their problems are specifically in the workplace, what they're finding difficult, what are their strengths. We look at developmental history, education, their career, reading, writing, numeracy, planning and organization, their memory, the concentration, attention, their health, how do they form relationships, whether they like to have a routine or whether they don't like their routine being disrupted, sensitivity to sound, smell, taste, touch. So it is very much in depth. We also get the consent, obviously, because we're retaining information on that individual, and it can be quite sensitive and confidential. So also they consent to having the assessment and also for their data to be stored prior to that. At the actual assessment, for a dyslexia assessment, it probably takes about 4 hours to get through everything. And that starts off with a background interview. Now, the basis for that is obviously the pre-assessment questionnaire. But as you can imagine, people are presenting with learning difficulties. And one of those difficulties might be filling out a form correctly, or it might be filling out a form at all. So that's always reviewed just to make sure that the conversation is the same verbally as it is in writing there. So we don't rely on just the pre-assessment questionnaire. And I really like to dive into that. I mean, that's one of the most important parts of the assessment, because I do get quite a few people presenting saying, I've got ADHD, or they present other potential mental health issues as well in that way. And they will have already done their own internet diagnosis, and they'll tell you what they've got. But it does give you a background, and it gives you the symptoms that you can actually look at and direct them into certain areas. So that's very important to get that information, and that allows me to form that picture of what I would like to look at when we get onto the actual formal part of the assessment. But it also gives me the opportunity to throw in my Socratic questioning and really delve into some of the details that might not be on the pre-assessment questionnaire as well. So once the interview is all completed, we go on to the cognitive assessment. So this is measures of verbal comprehension, perceptual reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. And there's about a dozen different assessments that we go through with that, so that we can, measure their working memory, measure their processing speed, and look at that. And I'm looking for a balanced cognitive profile in most individuals. So that's what I would expect to see for a neurotypical individual. So therefore, for someone with a neurodiverse condition, I'm looking for something that is not balanced in that one. Once that's been completed, we have literacy assessments as well. So the assessments that I use for these are the Wyatt-3 and the RAP-5, which are reading tests. So there'll be some reading and pronunciation, phonological awareness. So the nonsense words where they have to read them and accurately read them. Rapid naming tasks as well, which they do actually give quite a lot of information with learning difficulties, because they can tell me whether the individual is relying on drawing information from their long-term memory, or whether they can use processing. Processing, and then get on to the other things there. So after the assessment, a full report is given to the individual. So that's about 18 pages long. It's got all the details of all the assessments that they would do. And once that's presented to them, obviously some of it can be quite intricate, but it is quite clear that there's a summary that gives the diagnosis and also clear recommendations as to what they can do next. Also, I'm on hand for as long as they need me, so they can phone me and we can Zoom and talk about how I can help them going forwards if they don't understand things. There's also a summary report that goes to the manager and a workplace needs assessment. So reasonable adjustments can be made which are specific to that person's job in the working environment. And in conjunction with that, coaching and support, which allows me to develop that individual and help them maximize their potential, so they get that ongoing support to make sure that they've got the right things that they need. And as I said before, reasonable adjustments, that can be 25% extra in an exam. It could be software that is speech to text, text to speech, recommendations for additional testing, and those sort of things. So lots of things that we can do to help people. Additional testing could be recommended as well. So for dyspraxia, I would use the adult DCD checklist and also the DIDA. So that's the diagnostic interview for DCD in adults, which is very in-depth and gives us a good look and lots of information at dyspraxia. Dyscalculia, it's the Steve Chin checklist, which again is a very in-depth interview, and also a pretty tasty maths test that they have to do as well, which is quite severe, even to someone that was probably enjoy maths or has done GCSE maths. It is quite a challenge for that one. The other things that I do is ADHD screening and also some autism screening, which is done throughout the background information, but that's not to do the diagnosis because it's not a specific learning difficulty, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. So therefore slightly different, and it's usually diagnosed with a team as opposed to an individual doing that. So I don't do the diagnosis for that, but I would do the screening. So there's a few benefits. So you can maximize potential of individuals if you have a neurodiverse workplace. What I mean by that is, if someone can hyper focus on the task, if they've got the right conditions, they can get it done quickly and they can get it done efficiently. If they haven't got the right conditions, they might not be able to do that, and you're disadvantaging them. Diverse teams, dynamic thinking. Give me a diverse team anytime. I do not want clones, people being the same. I would rather have people prodding away, and that can be controlled, and we can get a better product or a better result afterwards, better decision making. Psychological safety. So if we can be open with neurodiversity in the workplace, then people can have a safer place to work where they want to go to and they want to thrive. And I think finally is the kindness and compassion. It's organizations doing the right thing for people with neurodiverse issues and specific learning difficulties, is creating the conditions as a leader for people to thrive in the workplace. So is that nearly my 10 minutes up, Julie?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I just thought I'd put a little collage of pictures there rather than have you got any questions? So that's a little bit about me. It gives you a face there. So we've got me with my grandchildren, my wife, and the dogs are on the couch. I'm on the floor because there's no room for me. A few smiling grandbabies, lots of dogs, me with a silly hat on, and the black and white one there's me as a baby. And I think I found my first weapon. I was probably going to get someone with that. And the one in the bottom corner, that's me conducting the heavy cavalry band in Spruce Meadows, Canada, for the Masters Horse Show. So that's when I was a young and handsome captain. So that's me done.